Today's episode is with Rupert Spira. Rupert is a non-dual teacher and author of several books, including Being Myself, A Meditation on I Am, and most recently, You Are the Happiness You Seek. This episode explores Rupert's perspectives on the cause of suffering, the path to returning to our innate happiness, the realization of our true nature, as well as what our true nature consists of. And we also explore whether awakening has a moral component to it. If you're interested in this type of content, you can subscribe to Mew on YouTube or your preferred listening platform like Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You can also support Mew by joining the Patreon, where you'll get access to exclusive benefits that aren't available publicly. Links in the description. Connecting with Rupert was a lot of fun and also a huge pleasure. I particularly love the perspective he shares on the ethical implications of the non-dual understanding. In particular, that it forms a basis of truth that transcends the conditioning of our finite and limited minds, and therefore offers a shared basis for compassionate action, understanding, and living. And so it's for, with, and through all of these reasons that I'm very happy to introduce this interview with Rupert Spira. So, in a lot of my recent interviews that I've been doing with people, I've been starting off with the same exact question, and I'd also really love to do that here. And that question is, what is suffering?
Suffering is the veiling of our innate happiness,
What veils our innate happiness?
thoughts and feelings.
What is the mechanism by which thoughts and feelings veil our intrinsic happiness?
If we get lost in our thoughts and feelings in particular, but in the content of our experience more generally, then we overlook or forget or ignore our innate happiness, which, so to speak, lies in the background of experience. So if we consider thoughts, feelings, sensations, perceptions, and so on as the foreground of our experience, the content of our experience, then when we give our exclusive attention to these, and as a result tend to lose ourselves in them, then we ignore or forget or overlook the background of our true nature, which is the experience of happiness or peace. In the same way that when we get absorbed in a movie, we overlook the screen. The screen seems to disappear behind the movie. Of course, it doesn't really, but it seems to. Why? Because we are focused exclusively on the content of the movie. Although in this case, the screen is analogous to what we essentially are. So, of course, if we're watching a movie, the screen is something we're seeing outside of ourselves. In this analogy, the screen is our true nature of being or being aware. And we, this presence of awareness, lose ourselves in the content of experience and thus overlook ourselves.
Yeah, it's pretty scary being a limited finite human. Um, right. So there's all of this content, and there's a body and a mind, and there's the extent to which awareness itself becomes immersed in either the experiencing or in the body or mind as self.
Yes,
And
yes. When I use the word experience, the content of experience, I include the mind and the body. So by the content of experience, I mean the mind, that is thoughts and images, the body, that is feelings and sensations, and the world that we know through perception. So all of that I consider to be the content of experience.
so It sounds like the realization of true nature, or the remembering of true nature, plays an important role in freedom from suffering.
Very much so. Very much so. Just as the experience of suffering is the forgetting or ignoring or overlooking of our true nature, so the recovery of our innate happiness involves the remembering of ourself, or the recognition of the essential nature of ourself or being. Yes.
What's true nature? What is our true nature?
That to which we refer when we say I am, before what I am is qualified in any way by experience.
It's an important qualification. The second part of that
So
does a lot of work, I think.
yeah, so if you were to ask me a subsequent question, what is the ego, or the apparently separate self, I would say it is that to which we refer when we say I am. That's our essential self or being, plus the qualifications of experience, or mixed with the qualities of experience. In other words, the words I am refer directly to our true nature. The words I am this or I am that refer directly to the ego or apparent separate self. So the self in the ego and the self in our true nature is the same self. One is qualified, the other unqualified. The analogy I sometimes use is the analogy of the actor John Smith, who plays the part of King Lear. Imagine John Smith leads a peaceful, fulfilled life at home. But when he goes to his theatre and puts on the character of King Lear, he becomes miserable. So why is King Lear miserable? Is it because of his relationship with his daughters or the war with the French? No, of course. The reason King Lear is miserable is because he's forgotten who he truly is. Who is he really? John Smith. And John Smith is naturally peaceful and fulfilled. So the self of King Lear and the self of John Smith are the same self. That's John Smith. John Smith is the only person present. But in the case of King Lear, John Smith has lost himself in King Lear's thoughts, feelings, activities, and relationships. And as a result of this, he overlooks his innate peace and happiness. How does he return? How does he recover his innate peace and happiness? By returning to himself, by extricating himself from the content of his experience and going back to himself.
So let's talk a little bit more about this I am sense. Uh, right. So there's like potentially a pitfall here in this mode of self inquiry where, like you said, the I am can become the qualified I am, like the egoic I am. But when awareness is detached from immersion in the mind, there's a I am sense and sort of and a mystery that's prior to that. Um, Look, one facet of this approach is neti neti. So like not this, not that. The recognition of I am also appears to be a content of consciousness, um, rather than. Go ahead.
Yes, okay. Two things. The neti neti approach, I'm not this, I'm not that, is a prelude or a preparation for the recognition of our essential nature. It's not what is traditionally referred to as self-inquiry or self-abidance, but it can be a prelude to that. In order to discover what we are, we first have to discard everything that is not essential to us. I'm obviously not my thoughts. I am that which is aware of them. I'm obviously not my feelings and sensations. I'm that which is aware of them, and so on. So there is this recognition, I am the awareness that is aware of the content of experience. So what is traditionally referred to as self-inquiry is really giving our love and attention exclusively to the fact of being aware, or simply the fact of being. Now, you're right, going on to your second observation, you're right that the formulation I am is part of the content of experience. But the experience to which that formulation refers is not part of the content of experience. That's our true nature. In other words, when each of us says, I am, we refer to an experience. We don't guess that we are. We haven't read in books that we are. We know that we are. That it's an experience. So that experience could be described as the awareness of being. And that is not that I use the word experience. That experience, it's a unique experience. It's an experience that has no objective qualities. It's not part of the content of experience. All content of experience has some kind of objective quality. But with the exception of one experience, the knowing of being or the awareness of being.
The way that appears to come up for me is like knowing that there's isness. So like isness is almost like a quality or a property of experience, which is like the being property. Go ahead.
Well, no, I don't think it's quite right to say that isness or being is a property of experience. Experience is a property of being. Being is prior to experience. In order for being or isness to be a property of experience, experience would have to be present first, and being would have to be one of its temporary finite properties. But if being were a temporary property of experience, then we'd have to ask, what is experience prior to being? It would not be. So being is not a property of experience. Experience is a property of being. The screen is not a property of the movie. The movie is a property of the screen.
This may be not a very helpful question at this point. But so then it seems like part of your metaphysics is that like there's never a point in which there's no movie screen, meaning that like there's never a point in which there's no experiencing or consciousness.
Well, those are two different things, Lucas. I would say yes, that there is never the absence of awareness or consciousness, but there may be the absence of experience.
Sure, content.
Absence of content, yes. I mean, ask yourself, rather than just speculate about this, have you ever experienced the absence of awareness?
So I'm under the belief that I have.
Okay, can I
Oh,
pause you
sorry,
there?
sorry. I know that was wrong as soon as it came out.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm aware of periods of time in which there was no experiencing.
No,
And there's
but
also a lack of memory. It's
that's a
different.
different question. If the question was not, are you aware of an absence of experience? I totally agree with you that is the case. The question was, have you ever had the experience of the absence of awareness, not the absence of experience?
I don't know.
Okay, well, let me ask you another question. Let's consider the possibility that you did have the experience of the absence of awareness. What would experience that absence? In order for that claim to be true, something would have had to experience the absence of awareness. What would that be?
That would be my true self.
Well, in that case, but if there's, okay, so you're suggesting that your true self may exist prior to awareness, but if it does, it wouldn't be aware. So it couldn't have the experience of the absence of awareness. So you're speculating. You're in the realm of belief now, not experience. You're speculating that your true self may exist prior to awareness, but you can never validate that claim. You cannot. That's not something that comes from your experience. It's just abstract philosophy, because nobody has ever had or could ever have an experience in the absence of awareness. That's really materialism. The belief in the existence of something prior to and independent of awareness, out of which awareness is subsequently generated. That's materialism. It's a belief, but nobody, I mean, literally nobody has ever or could ever have such an experience. So it's an abstract idea that bears no relationship whatsoever to our experience.
So I'm somewhat mindful of not wanting to like get caught up here for the sake of
Okay,
the
sure.
conversation, but just
Yes, yes.
one last attempt from me here to try to get some clarity. Um, right, so there is like this local mind body thing. There's like Lucas, and Lucas in the realm of form has a like a particular history, where I was born, and I'm like a certain amount of years away from being born. Um, and in deep sleep or prior to my birth, right, there's like an absence of memory, which isn't the same, or content, which isn't the same as an absence of awareness. I recognize that. And there are things like Zen koans that say things like, what was your true face before your parents were born? There's like a clear sense of like the non-local true self nature that is existent like prior to the arising of this particular like local manifestation. And so I have the sense of the presence of true nature being non-local to this particular mind body. um at the same time, um I don't know why that excludes the possibility of there being times at which there's no uh consciousness or awareness. I don't have experience of this, right? But there's like cessation, and there's also Nirodha Samapati. These like lights out experiences from like deep meditative absorption. There's also like the period of time in which um, this realm of like form hasn't like come together to create these like local mind body systems, which say that like the field of consciousness then uh, experiences itself, the non-local experiences itself locally through this like particular person. um so like that's my understanding, and I have a trouble like bridging the gap there to there's never a time at which there's no awareness. um I don't know why awareness couldn't also come and go like everything else.
Well, if awareness did come and go like everything else, then like everything else that comes and goes, it would have to come and go in some kind of medium. Anything that appears, that is, anything that comes and goes, appears in or on some medium or field or container. And what would that be? That's
Like,
one thing.
yeah,
So,
okay.
sorry, well, that's one question. Another question would be, if awareness is something, if we were to try to verify, how would we verify the claim that awareness comes and goes? What would be there to experience the appearance of awareness? Whatever there was that experienced the appearance of awareness would have to be present before awareness arose, and would have to say, oh, look, it arose. When I clap my hands, you're aware that the sound arises. It appears, it exists, it vanishes. Why? Because you were present and aware prior to its arising, during its existence, and after its disappearance. So you can claim reasonably the sound arose, existed, and vanished because you were aware. But if you claim that awareness arises, if that claim is anything but just pure speculation, then how are you going to verify that? If you're going to base your model of reality on a completely unverifiable belief, then everything downstream of that belief is going to be founded on the same uncertainty. Well, why not start with something that you are certain of and build a model of reality from that? And another um, another response to the question about the arising of awareness. If awareness was something that arose, it would start and stop. It would be temporary. It would be finite. If we make the investigation for ourselves, and of course, only awareness is aware. So only awareness can be aware of awareness, or indeed anything else. So if awareness makes the investigation into itself, asking itself the question, so to speak, am I finite? Do I ever experience my own beginning and ending? The answer is always no. So in awareness's experience of itself, and awareness is the only one that can know itself, its experience of itself is, I am eternal, not I am everlasting in time, but I am ever present now. That's our experience. That's our actual
Oh, yeah, I agree
experience.
with that. I agree with that.
So if that's something that's true and real in our experience, and we want to, that those of us that like to explore the question these ideas, explore these matters, then why don't we start with that certainty? One, there is awareness. Two, I am that. And in awareness's experience of itself, it is ever present. Why postulate the existence of something prior to awareness that then gives birth to awareness, when both these facts are contradicted by our experience?
Okay, I think the past 20 years of my life studying science, and then the last 3 years of doing spirituality are like hitting each other and imploding. Uh
Absolutely. Yes, yes,
uh
of
right.
course.
Uh I think that's about as far as we're going to get with me in terms of this line of argument for now.
Lucas,
Okay. Yeah.
don't remember that the purpose of science is not to know what reality is. It is to know how reality behaves. And your models of the models of science are very effective. They're very good at predicting and measuring how reality behaves. But philosophy is about something else. It's about what reality is. Who are we really? What is the world really? Not how does the world behave, but what is it in itself? What is it really? So there's no contradiction between your research as a scientist and your research into your true nature. They're entirely compatible.
Sure. I think I just mean the materialist programming that comes along with
Sure.
regular
Yeah, of
scientific
course. Yes. Okay. Yes.
investigation.
Yes.
I know the
Yes.
metaphysics is a separate issue.
Yes. Yes. That's all I was trying to do, is to separate out the two.
Totally. Yeah. Exactly. Um since we're on this, just as a brief mention, have you ever heard of the metaphysical position of non-materialist physicalist idealism?
Non-materialist and yet
Physicalist
physicalist. Or do you
idealism.
mean non-materialist and non-physicalist? Or do you mean non-materialistic but physicalist idealism? Not material but physical. And no, I
Idealism.
have. Uh, okay, that sounds like a contradiction of terms to me.
Sure.
What would physicalist idealism be? Is it
Uh,
physical or
so
is it mental?
oh, it's
Uh,
the idealism part means that the intrinsic nature of all phenomena is consciousness. The
okay, yeah,
physicalism part means that that intrinsic nature of consciousness is best described by uh the laws of physics as we understand them, relatively so, that they evolve by mathematical
okay.
rules.
Well, the way that intrinsic nature behaves may be so, but what that intrinsic nature is cannot be described by physics, mathematics, language at all. But the way it behaves could be described by physics and mathematics. Whether it's the best description or not, I don't know. But yes, I would agree with you, Lucas, that if we consider the possibility that the so-called physical world or universe is the activity of an infinite consciousness, then science could be the means by which that activity is explored and measured and described. So it wouldn't really be, science in this case wouldn't really be exploring, measuring, and describing physical stuff. They'd be exploring, measuring, and describing stuff that's made out of consciousness that appears to sense perception as the physical world as we know it. And science would be the modeling and measuring of that world. Yes, that's I would agree. And in that case, that reconciles science and non-dual philosophy.
Yeah, exactly. I've been listening to a lot of you actually talk more about metaphysics, and it seemed like this is a position of a crowd of people that I like to hang out with, and it seemed to match up with yours, and they have a particular name for it. I think the only thing I would add there is that you said that the intrinsic nature of it couldn't be described. Sure, because it's like pure subjectivity. It's like lucid knowing. Um, there's this like additional thing that can be posited along with that, which is that for every like structure that the content takes, that there's like potentially a mathematical object that's isomorphic to that structure. So that like if infinite consciousness evolves by say some mathematical rules, then for every experience that we have, there'd be a mathematical object or structure that's isomorphic to that experience, which doesn't explain exactly what awareness is or defines awareness. Um,
Yes. No, I grant, Lucas, that every manifestation of consciousness may have a mathematical correlate. I'm open to that. Um, but of course, consciousness itself doesn't. And just to pick up on one thing you said, when you say as consciousness evolves, I think what you mean is as the content of consciousness evolves, consciousness itself doesn't evolve. But yes, as the content of consciousness evolves, you're suggesting that there is a mathematical formulation of each of its particular forms. And yes, I'm open to that possibility. I see no reason why not. Whether it's possible to actually discover those or not is another matter. But yes, but because it's a form by definition, then that form can be represented in some way, language, mathematics, or yes. But simply by virtue of the fact that it has a form, we may not yet have the language or the mathematics to model those forms, but at least in potentially, it must be possible. Yes.
all right, awesome. So I think I'll probably have to think more for myself about the that awareness bit. I think that's a crux for me, like a particular belief that I could spend
Yes.
more time to.
Lucas, can we do an experiment?
Sure.
Going back to what you said about consciousness being non-local.
Mm.
Um, because when we say something is non-local, what most people understand by this, that it's not localized in a particular place in space. It's present everywhere in space. So this presupposes that consciousness is everywhere in space, or albeit not localized at any particular point. But I think it's even more radical than that. I would suggest that consciousness is non-local only if by that we understand that it doesn't exist at a particular place in space, but nor does it fill the entirety of space. It's not in space. When you fall asleep at night and you have a dream, the dreamer's mind localizes itself within its own dream as an apparently separate subject of experience. And from that point of view, it views the activity of its own mind as the dreamed world, although of course it doesn't know it's a dreamed world. It looks like a physical world. So the dreamed character is a localization of the dreamer's mind. But the dreamer's mind is not to say that the dreamer's mind is not local doesn't mean to say that the dreamer's mind exists everywhere in the dream world. No, that there is no real space in the dream world. When the dreamer wakes up, the dreamer realizes, oh, that the dreamed world didn't take place in space. Space was just how my mind appeared from the localized perspective of the character I seemed to become in my dream. So I agree with you, consciousness is not localized, but nor is it unlocalized, if by unlocalized we mean existing everywhere in space. So with that as an introduction, I want to give you an experiential taste of this. I want to make this experiential, not just philosophical. So would you agree, Lucas? It's the only thing I'm going to ask you to agree with, that whatever your true nature is, it is present now.
Yes.
And therefore, in order to access it, you don't have to refer to your past experience. It must be accessible in your
Yes.
present experience. Okay. Now, close your eyes. And in order to help you not refer back to your past experience, imagine that you're a newborn infant. This is the first experience you've ever had. We've agreed that our true nature is present now, so we don't need a past. Or, of course, you retain the ability to use language. But so, without reference to your past, imagine this is the first experience I've ever had. I haven't opened my eyes yet. You're brand new born infant. Now, go to your experience of yourself and try to describe it without reference to the past.
I notice sensation and content, and I notice it's empty space. It's like space that is filled by
Well, hold on.
experience.
Can I pause you then?
Mm-hmm.
You say it's like space. You haven't experienced space yet. You haven't
Oh,
opened
okay.
your eyes. You're a newborn infant. So try not to refer back to the past in your descriptions. I know it's difficult, but without reference to space, how would you describe your experience of yourself?
Oh, it's
Oh, I
knowing.
could. Oh, I just say, how could you describe your experience? Yeah, there is knowing. Yes, exactly. Yes, there's knowing. Yes, perfect. What else?
There's uh, there's also a sense of mystery, of emptiness.
No, when you speak of mystery, the word mystery only means something when compared to the known.
Mm.
You don't know anything yet. So the word mystery has no meaning. The word empty only has any meaning in reference to the fullness of things. You can only say that your space is, that your room is empty. That's with reference to your books and the furniture. So the word empty has no meaning. That you're referring to the past when you say mystery and empty. Okay, let's leave it then. Lucas, your response was perfect.
Yeah, it's like knowing.
You
There's knowing.
you were silent for a long time, and then you felt the pressure of having to say something. So you said the the the, the closest thing you can say there is knowing. And then you started wanting to add to that, and so you started referring to the past. You said it's a mystery, it's empty, and then you realized very quickly, no, you can't say that. And then there was a long silence again. The long silence was the best answer. There is knowing was was the next best answer. But you didn't mention time or space. But you mentioned space, but then very quickly you realized that it wasn't true of your actual experience. You were experiencing yourself. You were having experience, or there was knowing, but there was no experience of time or space. So right there, the knowing that you referred to was not in time or space. It was eternal and infinite. Now, normally we think to experience the eternal and the infinite is some extraordinary mystical experience that no, you were experiencing right then your true nature that did not appear in time or space. You were experiencing your eternal, infinite nature.
I notice the committee upstairs is everyone. It's like a parliament, and they're all like,
Yes, okay,
they're all
fair
like,
enough.
what is he talking about?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. But I'm
yeah.
just witnessing that.
But no. But you're quite right. But the committee upstairs are raising objections based on their past experience, not based on their current experience. Because what we are suggesting, your silence and my explanation of it, so conflicts with the committee's beliefs. But the committee's beliefs do not come from their experience. We went to our experience in that experiment.
Here's a thing that might help me or maybe not. Let's see, and others. Um, so part of like squaring non-dual understanding with other accounts of how the world works, like how we get trained up in science and materialism, um, is that it seems like in some way there is like a supervenient relationship between consciousness and the brain. Um, and so you can alter the brain and it will change experience. Um, but perhaps it doesn't change awareness.
Well, well, there are two things there. Let's say you have a glass of wine. You're sober,
Yeah.
and you look at your room. You see one thing. You have a couple of glasses of wine. You look at your room, and your perception is changed. So the glass of wine has changed your perception. So we have two perceptions: perception one before the glass of wine, perception two after the glass of wine. So the, the two perceptions are different, but they are known by the same awareness. Obviously, it is you that knows perception one, it is you that knows perception two, the same you, the same awareness. Now, the content of awareness has been changed, but the awareness that illuminates or knows the content, the perceptions in this case, has not itself changed. The awareness that knew your experience as a 5-year-old boy is in exactly the same pristine condition as the awareness that knows your experience now as a young man. But let's explore that further, because you started by saying if you do something to the brain, the content of it experience changes, if not the content of awareness changes, if not awareness itself. But I detect a subtle presumption in your question that doing something to the brain is doing something physical, and hence the what you were suggesting was that doing something physical affects certainly the content of awareness and possibly awareness itself. But do we know that doing something physical, so-called physical to the brain, is really a physical act? Do we really know that the brain is a physical thing? After all, if the character that you seem to become in your dream has a couple of glasses of wine, his perceptions will change. And he will use this as an argument to suggest that the physical substance, the wine, affected his physical brain. And as a result, the content of awareness changed. When you wake up in the morning, you realize, My brain was not physical substance. The wine was not physical substance. My brain is just, or my brain in particular, and my body in general, is just what the localization of the dreamer's mind looks like from the perspective of another localization in the dream. So could it be that our bodies, what we call bodies, are not really physical objects? They are how the localization of consciousness appears, just as the character that we seem to become in a dream, the body of the character that we seem to become in a dream is how the localization of the dreamer's mind appears in the dream. As William Blake said it so beautifully, he said, the body is that portion of the soul. By the soul, he meant the mind. So I'm going to translate. The body is that portion of the mind that is discernible to the five senses. In other words, when I look at your body, I'm looking at that aspect of your mind as it appears to sense perception. We cannot perceive mind with our senses. Through sense perception, we cannot see a thought. But could it be that what we see as matter is really what mind looks like when it is viewed from the perspective of sense perception? After all, that's what happens in a dream. The dreamed world is really how the dreamer's mind appears when viewed through the sense perceptions of the dreamed character that we seem to become. So if we just take that one step up, so to speak, and consider that this is a kind of dream. I don't mean by that it's not real, but it's a kind of dream in the sense that it is not ultimately made out of physical stuff. It's made out of consciousness stuff, that what we perceive as the universe is the activity not of stuff called matter, but of stuff called consciousness. It only appears as a physical universe when perceived through the sense perceptions of the separate subject of experience that we seem to be.
So, the content or the experience is what is like modified by changes in the dream stuff, like wine, like dream wine.
Yeah, yes. So the wine, just as the wine in the dream is really what an aspect of the dreamer's mind looks like from the perspective of the dreamed character. So the glass of wine that you and I drink, could that be an aspect of the activity of consciousness that appears as a physical glass of wine from our limited and localized perspectives? In other words, I'm not disagreeing with you. Yes, the wine affects the brain, which affects the content of consciousness. What I'm questioning is whether the wine is really physical stuff, whether the brain is really physical stuff. Could these not too be the content of the activity of consciousness? And in other words, when you have a glass of wine, it's one activity of consciousness affecting another activity of consciousness. And this is a phenomenon that we are familiar with. After all, our thoughts are obviously an activity of consciousness. Our feelings are obviously, even from a materialistic point of view, the activity of consciousness. And we are all very familiar with a thought affecting a feeling, with one content of our mind affecting another content of our mind. So we should not be surprised that a glass of wine affects our brain. It's one aspect of consciousness, the glass of wine, affecting another aspect of consciousness, the brain. So again, we don't have to appeal to anything that for which there isn't already a template in experience to describe what is taking place when we have a glass of wine or when someone hits us on the head. We don't have to speculate about something which is forever beyond our knowledge, namely something that exists outside of, prior to, and independent of consciousness, namely matter.
Right. So we were talking about so when you were guiding me back there in that inquiry, there's the sense of the silence, the knowing, is being unconditioned.
Yes. Yes.
Now, like the
That's why
experience.
that's why you couldn't say anything about it. That's why you were silent. Exactly. Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, it's okay. And I think something that gets like imported subtly from like a materialist paradigm is that so like granted like let's grant that, and you drink wine, and because experience is conditioned, and wine is like say a dream manifestation of like the non-local self, uh and it interacts with the dream brain and produces like conditioned effects that we experience as like modulations of the content of awareness, the content of yeah, content of awareness. um the thing that could get subtly imported is that like it's also possible to make modulations to awareness itself, so that like um because brains are vehicles by which awareness is able to show up as like a localization within like the field of self with a capital S, that there are like ways that you can perturb or destroy or mutilate a brain such that it will have effects on awareness. So you can think of like someone who's like in a coma, or like a really bad accident, they're half brain
No,
dead.
you don't know that it has an effect on awareness. You presume that it does, but you don't know that.
Sure. I don't know that.
Uh, just do an experiment for yourself, Lucas. Take two experiences, or take a number of experiences. First of all, take this experience. Imagine you were to describe it. You could describe your thoughts. You could describe your sensations, your legs on the chair, your hand on your desk. You could describe your perceptions, the sight of my face, the sound of my voice, and so on. All of that you could describe. But don't describe that. Imagine you were now to try to describe the fact of being aware. Okay? Take a snapshot. So you take a snapshot of the content of your experience. Imagine you could take a snapshot of your thoughts, feelings, sensations, and perceptions. But imagine if you could turn the camera around and take a snapshot of that which is aware of them. Yeah. Now go back 24 hours. Imagine that this time, 24 hours ago, you had also taken a snapshot of the content of your experience. Your thoughts, feelings, sensations, and perceptions would be different. But imagine turning the camera around and taking a snapshot of that which was aware of them.
It's always the same.
Perfect. Do the same in 24 hours' time, 24 years' time, always the same. Not only that, if everybody, all the people, all the animals that are aware of their experience, if they were to each take a snap, and they would do it at the same time, like now, 7.8 billion people, they take a snapshot of their experience, the content of their experience, all the images would be different. But imagine that everyone were to turn the camera around and take a snapshot of that which is aware of their experience. They'd all be identical.
I'm noticing that I, for some reason, have a belief that like, so like true nature is present right now. I don't have to do anything to be what I really am in this moment.
Exactly.
And it's also clear
Exactly.
to me that it's non-local to like this
Yes.
this
Yes.
conditioned thing that's going on.
Yeah.
But I'm noticing that I have a belief that like the connection of like non-local self to uh being inside the dream can be like cut by what happens in the dream. um that's a it seems like that's doing a lot of work, and it's like a strange belief, almost as if like I am non-local and the human mind body system is like an antenna, and if the antenna stops working, then like it stops picking up the like non-local self signal, and then you know.
Well, Lucas, if the human body is the appearance of a localization of consciousness, so consciousness localizes itself as an apparently separate subject of experience, and if we consider the possibility that our body is how that localization appears, then when that body dies and disintegrates, the disintegrating body would be the image of the delocalization of consciousness, returning to itself, returning to its unlocalized prior condition. Now, whether it goes all the way back when we die or not, that's another matter, but let's leave that for the moment. But so yes, if something happens to the body, then that would be the appearance of that happening would be an image of the when something happens. I mean, if the body was destroyed in some way or the body died, or then that would be the appearance of the delocalization of consciousness.
Oh, like to awareness.
Yes.
Right, and that can't be described.
Well, ultimately the essential nature of consciousness can't be described because all our words have evolved to describe the content of consciousness. Consciousness is ultimately that in terms of which everything else is described. But the words that have evolved aren't they can only describe the parts. They cannot describe the whole.
I think I'm noticing that I am subtly reifying consciousness as a thing.
Okay, yes. Well, it's inevitable or almost inevitable that we do, Lucas, because just by calling it consciousness or awareness, we reify it, we make it into a noun, and a noun is always a thing. That's why I very often use the word knowing rather than awareness, because it's a verb, not a noun. Consciousness ultimately isn't even a verb, but it's less concrete to refer to it as knowing than
Yeah,
consciousness. But
it seems wrong to even refer to it as a verb.
it, Lucas, if we want to speak accurately about the nature of consciousness or the nature of reality, we're just going to sit here in silence for an hour and a half. It's not possible to. So we have to agree with one another that we're going to use these clumsy symbols to refer to something that is not the symbol itself. So we need to, we need to we need to agree with each other and with your listeners that we all realize that by using the term consciousness or awareness, we're not implying that the reality we are referring to is some kind of a subtle object.
Yeah. It seems important because these are like very subtle beliefs that I feel like can be ways of like maintaining like resistance or contraction or
Yes,
reification
you're
that
absolutely
lead to
right. Yes,
subtle binding of
yes, yes,
separation.
yes. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, sitting in the mystery of the slight de-reification of consciousness before.
That's why when I asked you to describe your experience, I suggested that your silent response was the most accurate, and I could see that you were trying to describe your experience, but that no word that came to you, I could almost see the process going on in your mind. I could see that no word that came to your mind adequately, every word that came to your mind, you discarded it. No, that's not true. It's not accurate. And so you remained silent. I could see the process going on, and it was beautiful. And it was true. I could see you were really trying to find a word, and eventually you stammered out knowing. That was about all you could say, and it's probably the most accurate word you could say. You might have said I, or
I think I'm appreciating the value of silence more now.
exactly. But it's not a silence that's a disciplined silence. It's not a silence that comes from being told that it's wrong to think, or you haven't silenced your mind with violence, with a method, with a practice. It's the silence of understanding. It's the silence that comes naturally and effortlessly when the mind brings itself to its own ending. That's an effortless silence, not a manufactured silence.
Yeah, it stands in awe of the recognition, and the committee's like the committee doesn't have anything to say anymore.
Absolutely, absolutely, yes.
They're like, oh. So I'm noticing how much time we have left, and also questions I'm interested in asking you. I've been really enjoying the naturalness of this. But let's see if we can't hit on some other interesting things.
Okay.
So you describe or consider yourself as a direct path uh, teacher, or
For want of a better phrase, yeah,
sure.
yes, yes.
So uh, could you describe the stages of awakening in your perspective?
Well, it can happen in different ways for different people, but one quite common way would be to recognize first of all that we are not essentially anything that we are aware of. We are that which is aware. So that could be the first step, and that's a big step. For most people, all their lives they have um, paid exclusive attention to thoughts, sensations, and perceptions. Thoughts, feelings, sensations, and perceptions, and then suddenly they become aware. Oh, there's something that knows all of these. There is something that is aware of all of these. It's like a painter spending her life painting in the landscape, painting the sky, the sea, the trees, the fields, and then suddenly realizing, oh, there's something called light that illuminates the landscape, that renders the landscape visible. All I was painting before were objects. Now I realize that there is light. Although I can't see the light directly, it's all I'm seeing. So it's equivalent to that. To begin with, we think all there is to experience are thoughts, images, feelings, sensations, and perceptions. And suddenly this momentous recognition, but I am aware of all of these. So first recognition, I am awareness. And that liberates us to a degree from our exclusive fascination with the content of experience. And as a result, we get a degree of peace or happiness from this recognition. But it is not yet the full recognition of our true nature, because we've recognized I am awareness, but we haven't yet recognized the nature of the awareness that I am. So a further exploration is required to recognize the nature of awareness. And what is traditionally called awakening or enlightenment is the recognition of the nature of awareness or the nature of ourself. So that could be called a second step. But then we have to, the next stage would be to reconcile the awareness that we have discovered ourself to be and its nature with the content of experience from which we initially turned away. I'm not my thoughts, I am that which is aware of my thoughts, and so on. So at some point, we have to go back to the thoughts, feelings, sensations, and perceptions, back to the mind, the body, and the world, and reconcile them with our new enlightened understanding of ourself, and recognize that the awareness, the aware being that we essentially are, is the ultimate reality of everything. So to begin with, we believe and feel I am something, I am a body and a mind. Then the halfway step, the recognition I am nothing, I'm not a thing, I'm not the body and the mind, I'm awareness. And we recognize the nature of awareness. And then we return again to the content of experience, and we realize that I am everything, that the being that I essentially am, the aware being that I essentially am, is the ultimate reality of everything and everyone. So those could be the three steps. First of all, the recognition I am awareness, then the recognition of the nature of awareness, and then the recognition that everything is that.
That's very interesting and helpful. I love how it's different and also synthesizes a lot of different perspectives. And I think I'd like to offer some here for your clarification and exploration. Right. So that witness stage seems to be like very clear and like agreed upon, right? So there's like the
The witness is the first stage, I am
yep.
awareness.
Hmm.
It's not yet what's referred to as enlightenment, but it's the first step. Yes.
Right. Yeah. So yeah. So that stage is like fairly clear. Locke Kelly calls it like there's a risk of getting caught in the witness protection program. I'm not sure if you've ever heard him say that.
I haven't, but yes, exactly, yes.
Yeah,
One
sometimes people hang
and,
out
and,
there
and
too long.
sometimes people hang out there too long, and indeed there are teachings that just take one thus far, and that's fine. That's fine. It's just that's just as far as the teaching goes. It's not the full understanding, but it's a valid understanding.
Sure. Um, so then the second stage, as you described it, was recognizing the was coming back to content. Or sorry, was
No, no,
recognizing the nature of awareness and then
yes,
coming back to content.
yes, exactly.
Right. So there are two facets in stage two that I'm particularly interested in, and so actually, let me frame this a different way. Uh, in this model that I described earlier, when I described non-materialist, physicalist idealism, there's a lot of people who are like into this who also do kind of more gradual path work, and they come from like the school of like pragmatic dharma. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but this is more sort of like a Theravadan like or like Vipassana type path, which is about the like building up insight and metacognition that leads to defabrication of experience, such that like you end up in fourth pathing, which is uh, the experience of all content of consciousness, like self-cognizing in and through themselves exactly where they are, without referring back to like a center of experience. So the experience becomes like purely centerless. Um, and I'm so like in the way that you describe the stages and also like the path of inquiry and insight, I don't hear words like purification or defabrication used. Um, and in Buddhist traditions, these are seen as consequences of like insight and equanimity. There's like spontaneous purification through equanimity that leads to defabrication that leads to like the centerlessness.
Yes. Okay. Um, Perhaps it would help at this stage, Lucas, to define the difference between the progressive path and the direct path, because I can answer your question about purification in the context of these two different paths. So in the progressive path, it is recognized that we usually give our attention to 10,000 things, the 10,000 things, thoughts, images, feelings, perceptions, actors, on and on, one object after another. And um, to a mind that has been accustomed to doing this for years, for decades, it is considered too big a step to go straight back from the drama of experience, from the 10,000 things, all the way back to our true nature in one go. So they take an intermediary step. They say, okay, instead of paying attention to 10,000 things, pay attention to one thing, your breath, or the sensation at the soles of your feet, or your teacher, or your mantra, or a flame, or an image. Or, in other words, they replace the 10,000 objects with one object, a refined object, a transparent object, a sound, the breath, the pause between breaths, and so on. And the purpose of this is to steady the mind, which before this has been jumping from one object to another, by way of preparing it to sink back into its source of pure awareness. That's called the progressive path. Why? Because it or the indirect path. We don't go directly back to our true nature. We go via some kind of object of experience. A direct path, irrespective of the content of experience, we just go straight back to the fact of being aware. We don't stop. We don't take an intermediary step, the breath, the mantra, the teacher, and so on. So in the traditional progressive path, the purification of the mind and the body are often seen as prerequisites for the mind as it gradually makes its way back to its essential, to its essence. It's considered that the mind and the body need to be purified to facilitate this process of the mind returning to its source. Whereas in a direct path, no such purification is considered to be necessary, irrespective of the condition of the mind and the body. We are aware of our experience. If you are deeply depressed, you're aware of your depression. Therefore, awareness is shining there, even in the depths of the depression, and it is possible to turn your attention away, at least in theory, and in practice too, although of course it's difficult, but it's possible to turn your attention away from the depression and straight back to the light of awareness. So in this tradition, the direct path tradition, no such purification of the mind or the body is required. However, and this is sometimes not realized, the purification of the mind or the body, or the alignment, the realignment of the mind and the body with our recognition of our true nature takes place after the recognition of our true nature. It's not considered a prerequisite for that recognition. So the purification, or I tend to use the word realignment, the realignment of the way we think and feel, the way we act, perceive, and relate, takes place after the recognition of our true nature. It's not a prerequisite.
I've heard enlightenment described as the alignment of the human mind body with the awakened perspective.
That's fine. It's just a matter of defining terms. That's not how I use the term enlightenment. I use the term enlightenment and awakening synonymously to refer to the recognition of the nature of our being. That recognition can take place, and the mind and the body can still be in a fairly dysfunctional state. When you return, so to speak, from that recognition, doesn't mean to say all your issues are just cleared up overnight. There's a further process, which I call the realignment process, that takes place after so-called enlightenment or awakening. But it's just a matter of definitions. I'm not arguing with your definition. It's fine.
What is this? So what are the? Is there like a list of insights in that second stage that are the insights of the nature of awareness?
Well, I could list a few, Lucas. The recognition, once we've recognized I am awareness, then we can recognize awareness is ever present or eternal. It is unlimited or infinite. It is self-aware. That is, it is known by itself. It's not known by something other than itself. Everything else is known by something other than awareness, like thoughts. Sorry, everything else is known by something other than itself. Everything else is known by awareness. But awareness alone is known by itself. A thought does not know itself. A thought is known by awareness. A sensation in the body does not know itself. It is known by awareness. But awareness alone knows itself. So awareness is self-aware, eternal, infinite, ever-present, unchanging, self-aware. There is no disturbance in it. In other words, its nature is peace. And it is whole or complete, lacking nothing. That's the experience we refer to as happiness. So if you've recognized that the awareness that you are is eternal and infinite, ever present, unchanging, self-aware, inherently peaceful and happy, then you've really recognized all that really matters.
And then could you talk about returning to the
Well, so
content?
so what remains then? Oh, and I should add perhaps that it knows nothing other than itself. That's the experience we call love or beauty, the absence of otherness. So what remains to be done then? What remains to be done is to realign the way we think and feel, and subsequently act, perceive, and relate with this understanding. Our old, so in other words, we have to upgrade the operating system. The old operating system was revolved around the sense of ourself as a temporary, finite, separate self. And most of our thoughts and feelings arose on behalf of, and most of our activities and relationships were engaged on behalf of the separate self or ego. Now we've discovered that the separate self or ego is an illusion. We've recognized the nature of ourself. So our thoughts and feelings and our subsequent actions, perceptions, and relationships now need to be upgraded so that they arise on behalf of the, the self that we have now discovered ourselves to be, and its innate qualities of peace, joy, love, and so on. And that's a process that takes time. In fact, it's a process that has no end. There's no end really to realigning the way we think, feel, act, perceive, and relate with this recognition. It goes on forever.
Sorry, is that after stage three?
That is what I previously referred to as stage three, the
Oh,
realigning of the mind, the body, and the world with our new understanding. Stage one, I am awareness. Stage two, the recognition of the nature of awareness. Stage three, the realignment of all aspects of our experience with that recognition.
what I'm curious about is how and if the experience of centerlessness and like the returning to content as undivided from true nature, like where that comes back in. I think in Dzogchen it's referred to as one taste. I have this experience briefly of where like you talking to me feels like me talking to myself as
Yes,
awareness animated.
yes, that's it. It's the one taste. It's the recognition that the being or the aware being that we have recognized ourself to be is the reality of everyone and everything. So everyone and everything still appear as 10,000 things, but that appearance has lost its capacity to obscure its reality. We see through the 10,000 things to the one reality that they are an appearance of. It's like the movie has lost its capacity to veil the screen. Now, what's interesting is that the movie never really veils the screen. It is our belief that it is a landscape that seems to veil the screen. Now, the appearance of the world doesn't really veil reality, because in order to veil reality, it would have to be something other than reality. If you put a cloth over your screen, then that really does veil the screen. Why? Because the cloth is something other than the screen. The appearance of a movie, even a horrific scene in a movie, doesn't veil the screen, because all there is to the movie is the screen. Likewise, the universe, the world, doesn't really veil reality, because all it is its reality. It's an appearance of its reality. What seems to veil its reality is the belief that it is something other than its reality, that is, something other than infinite consciousness, namely matter. It is that belief that makes us feel that what we experience are 10,000 things, not one nameless reality. And that's what the Dzogchen Buddhists refer to as one taste. When appearances lose their veiling capacity, they cease to be a concealing power and instead shine with their reality.
They cease to veil the stage two insights.
No, they cease to veil they cease to. No, we're talking about stage three now, the one taste, where they appearances cease to veil their reality. The movie ceases to veil the screen. What does the world look like? 10,000 discrete and independently existing things. What is it really? One infinite, indivisible whole. The 10,000 things don't really, well, depending on our point of view, the 10,000 things either appear to veil their reality or they reveal their reality. They shine with their reality. The landscape in the movie, two boys watching TV, mum comes in, what are you looking at? One of them says, match of the day. The other says the screen. They're both seeing the same thing. But one has overlooked the screen because he thinks he's watching a football match. The other is not fooled by the football match. He knows he's seeing a screen. But everybody only ever experiences the one reality because that's all there is to experience. That's all there is. And when I say everybody, I don't mean that everybody is something other than the one reality. Everybody are just the viewpoints of the one reality through whose sense faculties it perceives itself as the universe.
Something related, like a quote that comes up for me that I like is from A Course in Miracles, where it says, "What's true can never be harmed. What's unreal does not exist. Herein lies the peace of God."
Exactly. Beautiful. That which is never ceases to be. That which is not never comes into existence. Exactly. That's beautiful. Yeah. And therein lies the peace of God. That recognition brings with it its inherent peace and quiet joy. Yeah, that's beautiful.
All right, Rupert. I'm mindful of the time here, and I'd love to ask you wrap up on some particular questions, particularly around ethics. Um, so I come from spend a lot of time in the effective altruism community. It's a community dedicating to try and it uses the mind a lot to do the most good possible. Um,
That's a good use of the mind.
it's good use of the mind. Um,
Yes,
and
yes,
uh, one important facet of this is this like perspective of long termism, that the long term future has like a really enormous weight to it, like a moral weight, due to all the time that as sentient creatures we could have to thrive if we don't go extinct this century. This century is pretty intense for human civilization.
yeah,
Whether it's nuclear war or new biotechnology, synthetic pandemics, or whether it's
yeah.
human level or artificial general intelligence that could lead to an extinction
Yeah.
event. Um, how does ethics, the practice of a moral life, fit into enlightenment and the recognition of true
Okay.
nature?
Well, there is an ethical implication to this understanding. What is this understanding? Essentially, if we were to sum it up, there are two aspects to it, one in reference to our inner life, one in reference to our external life, our activities, relationships, the world. In relation to our inner life, this understanding suggests peace and happiness are the nature of our being. But the second statement, which is really relevant to your question about ethics, we share our being with everyone and everything. So an ethical code that evolved from this understanding would be a code of behavior that was based on a single principle. We are one. We share our being with all people, with all animals, and with all things. But that single principle is really the only moral code one needs. St. Augustine said it. I can't improve on St. Augustine. He was asked the same question: what are the moral implications of this understanding? He said, love and do whatever you want. Recognize that you share your being with everyone and everything. And as long as you act in a way that is consistent with and an expression of that understanding, that's it. That will keep you safe.
It seems like truth is incredibly powerful, not just in terms of being able to navigate form and create science and technology, but also in terms of love and freedom from suffering. And one of the reasons why I created Mew is because I've been so interested in the ways in which like spiritual truths actually form a like very concrete basis of action, particularly because in this century we'll be creating like AI systems which may likely be like the next form of like Earth originating life. And so there's the question of like how is it that we align them with like what's good and true, with like what's valuable. How do we make a like a beautiful future of life with these like intelligent systems that we create, which awareness may come along for the ride in them as instantiations of life. And it seems like particular spiritual truths, like this sense of sharing being with all of creation, um, the sense of true nature, the knowing of true nature, the knowing of the reality of both happiness and of suffering in all of the other creatures around you. That these are all just like truths or facts that, if we only had enough mindfulness and awareness and practice of, could make it into our technology. But it seems like we live in a world in which like the practice of science and technology is so divorced from any notion of forgive me for using the word, right,
Yes,
spirituality or like the
yes,
sacred,
yeah,
that like the ethics or the practice of these like deeply important parts of civilization are just missing truths and components that would be really
yes,
helpful for their expression.
yes, yes. Because science at the moment is not. It's not. It's not carried out with this fundamental truth as its guiding principle. It's not engaged in service of this truth. Um, if um, there is to be world peace, it would have to be the fundamental principle behind that world peace would have to be something that we can all agree on. Why is there not world peace? Because we all disagree about about things because we only refer to the relative truths of the mind. Well, you're never going to get everyone to agree on the relative truths of the mind because everyone's relative truth is slightly different, and there are, as you know, lots of postmodern thinkers that think that all there is relative truth, simply because that they have not it's just a superficial view. They have not thought deeply. They have not discovered that there is something absolutely true, something that is true that is not relative to the condition of each of our finite minds. That's something that's the same, that's true whether you're a Buddhist or a Jew or a Hindu or an atheist or an agnostic or a criminal or a saint, or something that is absolutely true for everyone at all times, in all places, under all circumstances. Well, if we're going to have if society is, if there's ever going to be a world peace, it would have to be based on something that was absolutely true for everyone, but it wasn't relative to each of our conditioned minds. So this non-dual understanding is concerned with the absolute truth, has implications for the relative truths of the mind, about how the minds express the absolute truth. But the non-dual understanding is really concerned with what is absolutely true. We always go all the way back. What can we know for absolute certain? What is not subject to the temporary conditioning of each of our minds? And the nature of being is the one thing that everyone and everything has in common. That must be the foundation. It's the single principle upon which any truly sane society should be based, just that one principle alone. And then that would then be applied in the different spheres of human activity. For instance, think about politics. Think if all politics, if all politicians knew, and not just knew, but felt that they shared their being with everyone, not just the people they love and agree with, but the people they don't particularly like and the ones they disagree with. But think of the fundamental principle of their politics was we share our being. And the purpose of politics was to bring that understanding into society at all levels. Think of what politics would be based on that single principle.
Uh-huh.
Exactly, you laugh. Rightly so. I mean, look around the world at the conflicts that are taking place between nations. Would those conflicts be possible if the perpetrators, and I'm not saying anything about who the perpetrators are, I'm just talking about the perpetrators in any conflict. If those perpetrators understood and felt that the people that lived in the country next door to them or on the other side of the world, that they were the very same being as they are, would they behave the way they behave now? Of course not. Why do we not behave like that towards the people we love? Because what is love? The recognition of our shared being, the felt sense of our shared being. That's why we don't act cruelly and unkindly to people we like, precisely because we feel that we do love them. Well, in the non-dual understanding, we love everybody. We don't like everybody. Liking is to do with our conditioned minds. We cannot like everybody. But love has nothing to do with our conditioned mind. Love is the recognition of our shared being. And that's the first moral implication of this understanding. We are called to love everybody. We're not called to like everybody or to agree with everybody. That's not possible. But we are called to love everybody. That's the primary moral implication of this understanding. To love everybody, every person, every animal, and everything. If we understood this, if we felt this, and if we led a life to the best of our ability in a way that was consistent with this understanding, think of the kind of world we'd live in.
All right, Rupert. I'm mindful of the time here. That was really beautifully said. If people are interested in checking out your work or following you, where's the best place to do that? You also have a new book out.
I've got a new book out, You Are the Happiness You Seek. The best place to find out more would be, first of all, YouTube. I've got numerous videos on YouTube. Just go to my YouTube channel and my website, rupertspira.com.
All right, Rupert. Thanks a lot. It was a lot of fun. I loved it, and I loved how you kept pushing me to get the insight when I was ready to move on.
Well, Luke, it's been a beautiful conversation with you. I'm very touched by your passion and your sincerity, and what the work you're doing in the world is beautiful. So I wish you the very best with it. I'm sure you'll go a long way with it. Beautiful work.
Thanks, Rupert. A very special thanks to my mom, who is Mu's very first Patreon subscriber. There's nothing like the support of your mother, but if you'd like to join her in supporting the podcast, you can do so in the description of wherever you might be listening. Thank you for the support.